Alright, Hunter boy, you know you have to cop it. Android system, you can act from your pockets. Offensive security.
All right, friends, we are at the top of the hour. Let's get started. So, for our demo today, folks, we are going to be diving into SIEM Part 2, combining the logs. We're going to come back to our environment here in just a moment. Before we get started, I wanted to make sure that we talked about what we're going to be doing today and give you a little bit more context so you can understand why we are doing it. So, on the defense side of the equation, everything falls into, in my opinion, and everybody has a different one of the 5 different NIST cybersecurity framework items you see down below. Identify, at the high level, want to identify where things might be vulnerable. Protect, specifically our vulnerable data and assets that we have identified are carrying sensitive information. Detect anomalous events, ongoing attacks, and potential incidents and compromises. Respond to isolate and contain attacks and attackers before they can expand, and recover to normal operations. So you may be asking yourself, why are we covering the NIST cybersecurity framework? It's because today, folks, we are stepping into the role of a level 1 security analyst. And a level 1 security analyst is the front line of any defense team. They're mostly focused on detecting anomalous events, ongoing attacks, potential incidents, and compromises. And when they find those, they escalate those to our level 2 SOC team, which is primarily in charge of incident response. They're focusing on responding to those incidents so they can isolate and contain both the attackers and the attack before they can expand. As we all know, on the offensive side of the equation, these attackers are going to try to escalate their privileges, move laterally, maintain some level of persistence, and they have some very malicious attacks on objectives in mind for your environment. So we want to find them as soon as we possibly can and escalate them to our incident response team to handle. So today, in our scenario, we are a level 1 security analyst, and an attack has occurred in our environment. And now, folks, you might be asking yourselves, how do I know an attack has occurred in my environment? Well, that's because I'm going to initiate this hack myself. With a simple click of the mouse, I am running my phase 1 attack on our network. And if you're curious what our network, our environment looks like, I have it right here, folks. We have an application server and a domain controller in one VLAN. And we have a web server and a snort server in a separate VLAN. And going back to my notes here, we need additional information to escalate this incident to our level 2 SOC team so we can stop these attackers before they get any further into our network or our environment. So we're going to need some information today in order to escalate this incident along to our level 2 SOC team. We're going to need to know in what environment is being attacked. And kind reminder, this is what our environment looks like. We need to know who is attacking our environment. We need to know what is the attack. And we also need to know, has our environment been compromised? Because from my experience in a SOC, and I used to work in an MSSP, we had about 150, 200 clients. The attacks were endless, all day, every day. But it's a completely different story when an attack is actually successful and they've actually been able to compromise the environment. Completely changes the context of the situation. Have I lost any of my friends in chat, or is this all making sense so far? I got about a 10-second delay. on my side, folks. So I just want to make sure that I haven't lost any of my friends who are with me today. Shy1 B says, yes, Florida mids, perfect. Bad at everything really makes perfect sense. Okay, wonderful. So without any further ado, let's jump into our SIEM environment. And for the purposes of this demo, we are using the ELK stack. And ELK is an acronym. ELK stands for Elasticsearch, which enables the fast indexing and searchability of the logs. Logstash, which is the database that's housing all of the logs, and Kibana, that's the GUI, that graphical user interface that we see in front of us. And because we just initiated the attack, we're only going to want to see maybe about the last 5 minutes or so. Shy1B says, can you please show where the lab is located? I am happy to share that with you. You will find it right here, topic 18, SIEM part 2, combining the logs, and we are on phase 1, folks. So if you're following along at home, if you have a SOC-200 subscription, please join me today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Kiki says, is this challenge available for everyone? Kiki, it is available for those who have the SOC 200 subscription. If you don't have it, I highly recommend it. This is the kind of information that I wish that I had prior to joining a security operations center and being a level 1 security analyst. And why I'm so pumped to share this with you today is one thing that I can share from my experience is we need more folks on the front lines of blue teams everywhere. My team specifically was understaffed, and from everywhere else that I've heard of, theirs is also understaffed. And we desperately need more folks on the front lines because these folks are protecting the environments and the networks that we all rely on just to do our daily internet habits, whatever those happen to be. Bad at everything really says big agree. Thank you for that. All right. So as we look at the past 5 minutes, the way I like to look at this is our baseline, and context is everything. If you happen to be working in a security operations center, you have a little bit more context about what is normal and what is not normal in your environment. We don't have that deep context here, folks, but what we do have is we do have what we can see is about a dozen or so logs coming in and a 5 second cadence. So every 5 seconds, we see about a dozen or so, maybe 20, 30, 60 logs coming in. But does anything look off to you here? And while I wait for chat, I see a question. Dark Spaka says, I just joined. What kind of SIEM are we talking about? We are using the ELK stack here today, folks, but the importance isn't on the specific SIEM. From my experience, all of the SIEMs are more or less the same. There are some differences in the query languages and the different views and the way that it aggregates and shows the logs and the data. But at a very high level, the importance isn't on learning any specific SIEM as a tool. The importance is to learn the methodology about what is important, what are you looking for as that level 1 SOC analyst, because it can feel at times like looking for a needle in a haystack. But if you happen to know where that needle is, it makes finding it that much easier. All right. Noscape 690 says, can't have SOC 200 at this time, but working on Pen 200. Noscape, that's awesome. My experience has been a good offense is a good defense. And likewise, a good defense is a good offense. And if you happen to be good at both, you can join me in the middle on the purple side, purple teaming. But let's jump back into our demo, folks. So I could see about a couple dozen logs pouring in on any 5 second increment until we get here. And we can tell that this is odd comparatively to the dozen or so logs that we are seeing on a 5-second period. So in this environment, since I happen to have some experience with it, we can change our timing with this drop down menu if we want to, but we could also just simply click and drag on our timeline here to pull specifically just the events within that time period. So let's go back to our objectives. This will keep us grounded on what we need to do. We need to know first and foremost what environment is being attacked. So one thing that we could do, and I would not specifically recommend it, one thing that we could do is we have, and I'm going to write this down here, folks, because I love seeing how many logs drop off as we progress forward. 6,874 logs as of right now. We could look through each and every one of these and aggregate what environment are these logs logging. We could do that, but I see here an agent name. And this agent name tells us that this specific log is from Web01. So instead of going through each and every one of these, I'm just going to do a quick spot check. And I see that Web01 seems to be a really popular logging device. So one really cool functionality, and in every SIEM, they're going to have different ways to view this data. Here, we can do so through these filter by type fields that we have on the side. We know that the agent name is what we're looking for. So simply just clicking on this field on our left-hand side, we can see that 93.4% of all of these logs happen to be focused on our Web01 environment. So that to me says this is likely where our attack is taking place. I'm going to click this little plus icon here to add it as a filter, and you will see that we're going to drop down from 6,874 logs to 6,750. Okay, folks, so we lost about 125 logs, but we now have the bulk of our logging artifacts in one environment, which is a good indication that this is where our attack is occurring. Shy1B says, is Web01 the web server? Yes, in fact it is. Going back to our environment diagram here, we can see our web server Web01. That is in fact our web server Shy1Beast. And I'm also just going to add this to my notes. Seeing so many logs for any one environment when you'd only normally see about a dozen or so logs Web01 server is a clear indication to me that this is where our attack is occurring. So next, folks, we need to know who is attacking our environment. Any ideas from chat how we're going to find that information with the 6,750 logs that we have here? Chat is awfully silent today. Boot menu says IIS logs. Shy1Beast says IP addresses. Florida Mid says lol, no idea. Folks, I'm going to go for the IPs because that is typically how we identify attackers, by their IP address. So we are going to keep filtering. And one thing that we could do, but again, would not recommend, is we can look through these logs individually, and clicking this little caret icon here gives us a little more information on these logging events. So I see here a host IP field. Folks, do you think, just a quick yes or no, do you think that is what we are looking for? I'm seeing a resounding no, and I have to agree with you folks. That is not what we're looking for. And if we're ever uncertain, within our demo environment we have here, we can see that our web server is running on 192.168.68.33. So if we were ever in doubt, we can cross-reference that with what our SIEM is picking up, and clearly it would not be our host IP. But you're right, we are looking for an IP address, and this is an internal IP address. And what we are looking for, boot menu, nailed it, a source IP. So some of these may pick up a source IP, some of them may not. I don't see one here, but we can always go into our search field names and just put a quick IP in and see what we have available to us. And here is our source IP. And I just love this view. I would use this type of view in the SIEM that I had worked in, which is not one of the well-known SIEM brands, so there's really no point in naming it. But this is the type of view that I loved because it tells you so much. Just looking at this type of view, I could see that the overwhelming majority of logging source IPs is coming from this IP address here. So I'm going to copy that. I'm actually going to also filter by it as well because that seems to be our attacker. And our logs will drop from 6,750. Now we're down to 6,554 logs. And again, this will not be something that will be available to you if you were a level 1 SOC analyst working on a blue team. But a really nice part about this demo is if you're ever unsure, is that the IP of our attacker? We could always go to our nifty Hacker Simulator 9000 and we can see that it is in fact the IP that we ran the attack from. So we can with confidence say, yes, this is our attacker, and we're going to add this to our report. All right, folks. So now we know what environment is being attacked. It's our Web 01 server, and we know who is attacking our environment. It's 192.168.68.54, but we still need to know what is the attack that is taking place on our web server. Any ideas from chat how we would ascertain that data from the 6,500 logs that we have here in our elk stack? Any ideas, chat? Neoscape 690 says look at the ports. Taka Taka agrees with you to look at the ports. Any other ideas from chat? Mick says filter by URLs. And Mick, I have to say, I like that approach because Bits Pirate, the question was, I'm going to take this back to our notes. We know what environment is being attacked, and we know who is attacking our environment, but we need to know what is the attack that we are observing in our environment, specifically on our Web 01 server. All right, so we are going to jump back into our SIEM. And I like the idea of checking out the URLs. Since it's a web server, it's only natural to assume they're trying to access some internal URL on our web server. So let's type into our search by field and see what URL type of information is available to us. And we see we have URL extension, URL original, URL path, and URL query. Let's take a look at the query and see at a high level what we have here. All right, so we have a couple of these, and we may want to add this as a column so that at a high level, we can observe what the URLs they are just by simply scrolling down. Get rid of that. All right, folks. So we will see some data here, but there doesn't appear to be a lot of data coming in from our logs, and that might be because we need to filter out some of this data a little further. So taking a look at what we have here, I'm seeing a couple things. Apache error. I'm also seeing a lot of Apache error. It's clear they're trying to attack our Apache service. It's good information to know. See if there's a URL provided here. I think we need to go a little deeper. See what's available to us by, in fact, let's take off our URL original. Perhaps we don't want that just quite yet. I'm seeing under data stream dataset a lot of Apache errors. So perhaps that would be the right field to take a look at. And here we could see that the vast majority are resulting in an error, but a small minority is actually resulting in access. So perhaps we're not so concerned about where the errors are. We want to know what they've been able to access. So let's add that to our filter. And let's see how many logs we have left. Okay, folks, now we are down to 5,583 logs. So we're getting closer. And we may want to take a look a little deeper at any one of these logs and see what kind of information they provide to us as we are continuing to whittle down the logs that we have, looking for that needle in a haystack. Let me know if any of these fields jump out to you, and I'll let you know when something that I see jumps out to me. Okay, I'm starting to see something that's jumping out to me. Clearly, they're making a GET request of some sort, and they're receiving a 404 status code back. So if we were curious, and we want to be curious, what kind of URL they are trying to access, we may add this specific field to our filters. All right, I'm seeing a lot of 404 errors and a couple 200. And I think we should take a look at both of them because we're curious and it's important to remain curious. Boot menu says I'd want to see the 250 codes or the 200 codes for that IP. I agree with you. The 200 codes is going to have some malicious stuff behind it. But if we just want to see all of the attacking attempts, we may want to just take a look at this and add, as we had before, the URL query to our search. And I'm adding this as a column because I specifically want to take a high level view of all of the queries this individual is trying to access. Oh, With a 404 error, maybe we can't do that, folks. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. So let's remove this. Actually, let's change it to 200. So now that we are at a 200 level, we start to see something that may be very problematic. Do you see what I see in our logs? Does anybody know what kind of attack this is called? Yes, they are using Netcat to do something. Alex T says command injection. Yes, they are using a command injection attack in order to send back a reverse shell for them to catch. So now that we know what the attack is, we're going to add that information to our notes. And we have one final question left, which is, has our environment been compromised? But before we look at has our environment been compromised, I'm curious to see all of the failed attempts. In a real world situation, if this wasn't a demo, I probably would see this and I wouldn't need to see any more. I've seen enough. I would escalate that to our level 2 SOC team. Because time really is of the essence if you are a level 1 SOC analyst. As much as you would love to get all of the details and the logs for your incident response team before you escalate this on up to them, time really is of the essence. And a couple of minutes could be the difference between being able to isolate and contain this attacker and this attack before they're able to expand and move laterally, escalate their privileges, set up some sort of persistence mechanism. So I wouldn't wait any longer, but because this is a simple demo and we're curious, I want to see what are all of the attacks. And I'm not seeing the attacks here under URL query, so perhaps we grabbed the wrong column. So let's take a look at where the information is being stored on one of these logs where we're not seeing a URL query. All right, I'm seeing URL path and URL original. So perhaps that is what we want. Let's go with URL original, and we'll take off URL query for the time being, because it is important to remain curious. And that's the wonderful thing about these environments is that you're not personally responsible for someone's security. So you have the luxury of being able to really dig into the attack that's happening and learn as much as you can about it. Because all of this information is going to be super helpful if you do happen to find yourself on a blue team or working with a blue team or even just tangential to a blue team. All of this is really interesting and really important. So all of these are our successful accesses with our command injection attack here. But let's say we wanted to take a look at all of the different attempts. Let's change this back to a 404. And now we can see this attacker is trying what appears to be, actually, I don't want to spoil it. Does anyone happen to know what the attacker is using to try to access all of these different URLs? Fuzzing, okay. Alex, I like that. It's definitely close. I would say it looks like they're using a word list of some sort. A directory brute force? Could be, could be. They're certainly trying to find a valid place on the web server in order to unleash their command injection attack. So here we can see all the attempts, and I may just want to update my notes just to be complete here that it's a command injection with a word list. So we can see all of the 404 errors, 404 being that page does not exist. So it is returning back a 404 error, but we can see that they clearly are using some sort of word list because I mean this time differential here is what? Maybe a minute, and within a minute they've hit 5,500 different URLs. Interesting to see, but we are going to go back. We're going to go back and change this to our successful 200 status code, and 200 success is a success code. There are a couple other HTTP response status codes, but for this demo, the important ones to know is 404, which is an error, as I'm sure you've all seen plenty of 404 errors, and 200, which is success. So our last question. Tanker Darren says the timestamps didn't change, but there were a ton of attempts. Yeah, the time is not going to change unless I change the filters that we have set up here. So that's going to remain the same for now. But our last question that we are going to ask ourselves, and perhaps this might be something that our level 2 SOC team would do. Really depends on the blue team. Uh, the difference between where on the blue team, who's in charge of detecting and who's in charge of responding. Funny story enough, since our SOC team was vastly understaffed, it would become the SOC level 1 security analyst responsibility to do some of the respond activities because we only had for the longest time, and maybe still to this day in that SOC, one incident response individual. So with time of the essence, sometimes as a level 1 SOC analyst, I taught myself how to isolate and contain these attacks before they got any further because I was really anxious that one of our clients would get compromised and it would be my fault, and I was not going to let that happen, folks. So I went above and beyond in my role. Dr. Nezzer says, do you have recorded sessions as well? Yes, Dr. Nezzer, all of these OffSec live sessions that we are doing are going to be recorded and available to you. My understanding is they are going to be uploaded to YouTube. If that is not accurate, someone from the team please chime in, but that is my understanding. We are going to record these and we're going to upload these to YouTube so you can watch them later. All right, folks, jumping back in, we still need to know, has our environment been compromised? The last and most important question. So let's jump into our attack and let's take a look at what kind of information we see here. All right. I see the event outcome is a success, but that by itself is not enough for me to know whether or not this environment has been compromised. So let's keep looking and see what other information is being logged by our SIEM here. So I see a GET request, and most troubling, I see 3.1 kilobytes in the HTTP response. Oh boy, that's bad, folks. Also see a user agent is using some sort of curl version 7.7.4, but what really tells me as a security analyst that this was likely successful is the byte exchange. When I worked in a SOC, we would see, geez, maybe 100 or so attacks per day, more maybe. I feel like 100 is rookie numbers. I feel like the number had to have been between, on any given day, 100 and maybe 1,000 attacks. But keep in mind, I worked for an MSSP, a multi-security service provider, and we had 150, 200 clients. So across those 150 to 200 clients, these attacks would be endless, literally endless. But most of the time, we had a really good firewall block list that was automatically blocking the attacks, right? So what I could see in the logs is the attack or attempted attack had taken place, but that there were no bytes being sent back to the attacker. And that was a very good indication that this attack was not successful. It was being stopped by our firewall. But anytime I saw that there were bytes going back to the attacking IP, oh boy, that was scary. Fantasy Sisuhail says, "Hello, just got here. What tool is this?" We are using the Elk stack. But folks, the importance isn't on the SIEM. Keep in mind, the SIEM is just a tool. The most important thing that you will learn from the SOC-200 series is the methodology for how do you approach these sorts of scenarios. And what's really cool about this series, if you don't mind me doing a little humble brag for a second, is you get to not only do the attacks yourself. And they make it really easy to perpetrate the attacks in these environments. They put them into a script that you can run. But if you really want to learn more about the offensive side of the equation, the red teaming side, you could open those scripts, take out the attack commands, and you could run those yourself and use that to learn as much as you possibly can about how these attacks are perpetrated. For this specific environment, we have created a Hacker Simulator 9000, which runs all of the attacks that we will need for this topic and for these learning units. But what I love about it is I've always loved learning about the offensive side of the equation. So being somebody who got their start on a blue team, it was really cool to work through this course. Uh, I really enjoyed it. I couldn't recommend it enough. See some chatter in chat. Else Sloveni says, I heard about getting detailed info and next steps from the attacker as a form to improve defense mechanisms. Is that correct? Every good SOC team is going to run some sort of attacks on their environment to see where their environment is strong and able to not only detect but stop those attacks, but also where within your environment are these attacks able to get through and some level of access or success. And what I'm describing, folks, is purple teaming, knowing both the red and the blue side of the equation. You are then, in fact, a purple teamer. Fantasy Sisuel, I'm sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing your handle. Fantasy Sisuhail says, "Are the demo gods with us on this fine night?" So far, they are, but I don't want to jinx it, folks. We still have 20 minutes left of this demo, and we still have a couple more things to do. So jumping back into our SIEM, we can see here there is a byte exchange. That is enough for me as a level 1 SOC analyst to say, very likely, byte exchange observed. So at this point, I would kick this ticket off to my level 2 SOC team, my incident response team, whose primary goal is to confirm that the attack has taken place and that the compromise has in fact occurred, but then respond to it to isolate and contain that attack and these attackers before they're able to go any further. But we still have one more thing that we need to do as a level 1 SOC team, and that is check our alerts and see if any of our alerts fired when this attack happened. So let us do that, and that will be located, if you or happen to be following along with the SOC-200 course, you will see our alerts underneath Security Alerts. And oh boy, I am not seeing any alerts here. That is a very troubling sign. Perhaps our rules were not set up appropriately. Why don't we take a look? Oh boy. I see here that we have 653 rules, but it doesn't look like any of these rules are turned on. Oh boy, that is quite the self goal or own goal. I'm gonna blame the intern. That pesky intern, I gave him the responsibility of making sure our rules were up to date and airtight, and they turned those rules off. I am very upset, but that's okay, folks. We are going to create the rule that we need right here and right now so that should these attacks happen again in our environment, we are not only able to catch it promptly, we are alerted to it as soon as possible. So we are going to create a new rule, and we're going to want to create two separate rules here. The first rule that we're going to want to create is going to alert us when somebody is attempting some sort of web server enumeration with a word list. So you might be asking yourself, okay, which rule type will we use to create this rule? Any ideas, chat, of which rule type we're going to proceed forward with? Shy1B says the intern does it again. It always happens to be the intern, doesn't it? At least lately, I've just noticed that seems to be the common cause. Perhaps if we just removed all interns everywhere, we wouldn't have so many security vulnerabilities. Or perhaps that's just a convenient excuse. We'll never know, folks. It will be a mystery. Bad at everything really says if your intern is in charge of your detection engineering, it's not the intern's fault, and I would happen to agree with you there. All right, I'm seeing some really good suggestions from the chat. Boot menu says event correlation. Alex T says threshold. Mick 57980 says count HTTP/404 and alert on threshold. Shy B says, what about the next gen of cybersecurity? If you remove interns, please don't do that. Yeah, folks, we need those interns. We need as many folks as we can get into information security. I think the intern excuse is a very common and very convenient one. We need those interns, but perhaps we should not be putting them in charge of the detection engineering to bad at everything really's point. An excellent point. We love our interns. We need our interns. If you happen to be an intern, I want you to know we love you, and it's not your fault. All right, I agree. Let's go with threshold. Since we saw so many attempts, we're going to want to aggregate the results to detect when the number of matches exceeds a specific threshold. So I saw a couple of things really commonly. I saw Apache access, and to your point, I saw HTTP response status code is, and I just love how easy this Kibana query language is. I mean, they really make it simple to use the query language. We're going to use this colon here, and we're looking for specifically 404. And again, what I love about this is not only can we set the threshold, I'm going to bump it up to 250 because why not? We can also preview the results to see if it caught. All right, yeah, folks. It looks like it's catching the attack. So that looks good to me. We can continue, and we're going to want to set this up so that when we see it, we know exactly what it is. In fact, perhaps, did I forget something? I feel like I did. Let's see if we can edit this one more time. That's okay. Want to name it something logical. Give it a little description. If it's just enumeration, we saw enumeration day in and day out. I would put that as a low severity. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Sorpy says, but it might generate a lot of false positives. El Sloveni says, is this supposed to be an alert? Yes, this is supposed to be an alert that we are setting. And that's why we went with the threshold. They would need to see over 250 specifically HTTP response status codes 404 and Apache Access in order for this to trigger. So we can leave this as is, and this is going to run every 5 minutes with an additional minute look back window. That looks fine to me, folks. And if this were to be a real environment, we would want this to trigger some sort of alert for us. And here we could see that we have some options. I'm curious from the chat, where would you want this alert? Would you want to see an email, a Jira ticket, something on Microsoft Teams, a notification on Slack, or something else? And while I get some feedback from the chat, I'm going to take a look at what we have in the chat and make sure that I am answering your questions. Tanker Darren says, how much experience in IT do you recommend before having before attempting to move into cybersecurity? I would say you really don't need to have experience in IT security as like a help desk technician or a sysadmin. When I joined on the blue team, I had I had gone the route of going through a SOC 200 like course and learning as much as I could. And to be honest, that was good enough for me to be pretty good at my job, and you learn with experience. So I personally don't subscribe that you need to have IT experience before moving into computer science or before moving into cybersecurity. But having the experience of working through the SOC 200 course is going to make you that much better, that much more confident. And when it comes time to interviewing, it's going to make you that much better position to sell your skills and experience as someone who's been in a hands-on demo-like environment like the one that we are using today. All right, so since this isn't a real environment, we're just going to have it perform no action. So let's create and activate our rule. And if we wanted to edit any of our rule settings, we could just click our Edit Rule Settings button, and we see all of the things that we have here. One thing I did forget, folks, is I want to make sure that when we get this alert, it is grouped by a source address and a user agent name. Make our lives a lot easier. So that's good to me. I'm going to keep that as it is. Alex T says, they would like to see webhook to the server to tell it to slow down the attacker. Interesting. All right. It's and LLC says, I'd grab a list of SMS gateways and use that to send a text message alert as well. I'd set the alarm for text messages from that address to Siren. I don't think Siren's going to be too happy about that, folks. Nefarious010 says, I would send this to DevNull. That is hilarious. Well, you absolutely could, but it's not really going to help your blue team should you be sending all of your alerts to DevNull. OX Andy says, I'd take that SOC 200 just to learn how SOC folks work and how to avoid triggering all those alarms. Yeah, I can't agree with you more, OX Andy. Knowing how a blue team operates, what they're looking for, really helps you to evade them should you happen to be on the red team. Probably shouldn't be sharing that with you, but I am because information is power. Okay, we need one more rule and we're going to create it. And that rule is specifically when we see a successful command injection attack, we want to get an alert that lets us know, hey, we have a command injection attack. So for this query, we're going to go with custom query. And we're going to keep things more or less pretty similar. We're looking for similar but different things. Apache access and jumping back over, a couple of things that I would add is since we're looking for something that's successful, I would probably pull this 200 level response code. But then also in this command injection attack, I am seeing a lot of things that I would want to make sure that I included in the query, like these pluses, super sus. These dashes are actually encoded spaces. Does anyone in chat happen to know what an encoded space is on the other side? How do you encode a space? What would you use? That's right. You guys nailed it. So we'll include that like so with wildcard something anything encoded space anything. Other thing that we had also noted were the pluses. And just to make sure that we have our rules set up correctly, we're going to preview results and make sure that it's firing. And there we see it, folks. One command injection attack. So with that, I feel good moving along. Let's keep it moving. And we'll want to name this something logical. Maybe add web-based, since that is where this is happening. A little description. And this, if I see this, I would bump this up to a higher severity level, but maybe not that high. Give it a tag of web CMD injection. And we could keep these as is. And again, folks, if we were in a real live scenario, we would want this alert to go somewhere that we are monitoring. If you happen to really love your email inbox, perhaps you send it there. If you love Jira or Microsoft Teams, of course, you could set it there. For me, I would choose Slack. It would probably make me hate Slack, but I would choose Slack. But all of these require some sort of license. And since this is just a demo, we don't actually need it. So we'll perform no action and create the rule. Now, unfortunately, folks, we've got about 6 minutes left of our OffSec live session today. And these alerts typically take about 10 minutes in order for them to fire, possibly longer. So we may not see the alerts on our side, but with the 5 minutes that we have left, I would love to open up the chat to an Ask Me Anything, an AMA, of the SOC-200 course or my experience as a level 1 security analyst. I'm just super glad that everyone is here and y'all are interested because as I said, folks, we desperately need more folks on the front lines of every defense team. And even if being on the defense side of the equation isn't your information security dream, having that experience is going to open so many doors for you. And from what I gather of the industry, there are a significant amount more defense related jobs available. So that would be a great place to start, get your feet wet, as they say, get some experience, learn everything that you can, and then parlay that into doing the thing that you really want to do, or take a couple intermediary steps to get there. All right. I see a comment from Swappage that says, if I were to increase my chances of catching a web shell running on my web server, I wouldn't rely too much on that 200 OK status code. I remember having my web shell return a custom error code for that exact purpose of not alerting SOCs and slipping under the radar of analysts. Swappage, that's a really great point. For the demonstration that we did today, going back to the rule that we just created, this would, let me just edit this really quickly, this would catch our attack. But this one rule alone isn't going to catch every single command injection attack. And that's why many SOCs will have a red team come in and try to get into their environment so that they can see how well their rules stand up to an actual attacker like yourself who is using a different method in order to return the web shell. So that's a really great point, Swappage. Thank you for that. We have 3 minutes left, folks, and I would love to see any questions that you may have, again, on the SOC 200 course or my experience as a level 1 security analyst. Swappage says, sorry, I didn't tune in the stream since the beginning. I wasn't intended to have you diverge on your schedule. Thank you very much for the explanation. Swappage, I'm here for you. I'm here for all my homies who want to learn more and share what they know, because knowledge is power. Bad at everything, really. What's your favorite tale from the SOC? Oh boy, that is a great question. I had this one client, not gonna name any names because we don't do that here, folks. But I had this one client that they, I guess I'll preface this with, we saw on our end in the Security Operations Center, one of their employees had put in a USB stick and uploaded some weird executable that wasn't really clear what it was. But when we took the hashes and ran them against VirusTotal, it came back with something crazy like 60 out of 70 of the different vendors had flagged this as malicious. So we reach out to the client team and we told them what we observed. Hey, one of your employees has inserted a USB stick and run some weird executable that is triggering all of these antivirus detection systems. We think you should look into this. And guess what came back from the client folks? Don't worry about it. USB sticks are fine. That literally blew my mind. This one client in particular, oh boy, I have so many stories that there's just no way I could fit all of those juicy stories in the last minute that we have. Unfortunately, folks, it looks like our elk stack is going to need a little bit more time to take the rules that we have created, give it one last try. Perhaps we will see something now. Suspicious.low, move on. Nefarious 010, my friend, that is the end of the demo. I would have loved to have shown you the alerts on the SIEM, but you'll just have to imagine them for yourself or buy the SOC-200 series and go through the demo, set it up, and get the alerts yourself. Give it one last try, folks. Ah, shucks. All right. That's it, folks. That's all the time that we have for today. Nefarious 010 says, I meant that was the diagnosis of the sus USB file. That's funny. B1K99 is playback available. You're darn tootin' that it is. Alex T, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the demo. I had a lot of fun. Did y'all have a lot of fun? Bad at Everything Really says, great stream. Bad at Everything Really, thank you so much for being here. I am super glad to see you again. OSWP and OSAA. OffSec opponent like lion phone Serengeti. And I turn them fire while shitting at the confetti. When you have computer system with no integrity. Thank you for joining us, everybody. I super appreciate it. Honestly, it wouldn't have been as fun if we didn't have as many people and as engaging of a chat. So, super appreciate you being here. Spoofing and coding, debugging and scanning, delivering the good like them name Peyton Manning, reversing what the competition cursing. Can somebody with a link to this song put it in the chat for my homie No Escape 690? The name of the song is Holiday, and if you just look up Call OffSec song, you'd find it. Route 01, hi, I'm late. Don't worry, this will be available for replay. You can watch all of the goodies. Them never seen the cracking cell a lot in my pocket and the rest of them are infantry. Them a king of the bugging, so them a straight tugging when they come to the legal acting and the other skis lacking. Anasi, thank you, my man. The rest of those noobs who run the tools, say them not have what it takes to break the rules. Run them call it Linux like a Jedi master. Breaking out your system like a full-time blaster. Check the counter, boy, you know you have to cop it. Android system, you can hack from your pockets. Call OffSec, them are the very best. Call OffSec for penetration tests. Who's OffSec? Go educate the rest. We call the expert DB on the training OffSec. Who for me so is? You must try harder to keep up the pace. Otherwise you will be a big disgrace. Tell the competition them to take a rest. OffSec or run the game. Let me suggest the GM or run the Wild West. Can't test OffSec. Can't test OffSec. Oh, can't test OffSec. Can't test OffSec. Oh, pa ping ping ping. Hey. Yeah man, check net hunter boy, you know you have to copy it. Android system, you can hack from your pockets. Offensive security. What do you guys think? One more time? Let's play it one more time, y'all. I just love this song. It is so good. Yeah, all I've said, yeah man, I'm gonna tell him say, offensive security, Call OffSec, them are the very best. Yeah man, Call OffSec for penetration tests. Penetration, yeah. Who's OffSec? Go educate the rest. We call the expert DB on the training OffSec. Who for me so is? You must try harder to keep up the pace. Come now. Otherwise you will be a big disgrace. Disgrace. Tell the competition them to take a rest. OffSec or run the game. Let me suggest the GM run the Wild West. OSCP and OSCE, OSWP and OSAA. OffSec opponent like lion phone Serengeti. And I turn them fire while shitting at the confetti. When you have computer system with no integrity, and you need to give a test, call OffSec, you see. Best defense of good offense, they won't chop them, see. Proactivate your cover, they get that security. Sniffing and diffing and hacking and cracking. Now send the competition, crying and packing. Spoofing and coding, debugging and scanning. Delivering the good like them name Peyton Manning. Reversing what the competition cursing. Them fishing, them wishing, what the other them just wishing. Employing exploits with the samurai precision. OffSec company, the mad division.
All OffSec, them are the very best. All OffSec for penetration tests. Who's OffSec to educate the rest? We call the expert DB and not training OffSec. Who for me so is? They must try harder to keep up the pace. Man, boy. Otherwise you will be a big disgrace. Tell the competition them to take a rest. OffSec or run the game. Let me suggest you GM or run the Wild West. You are a hero today, but boy they found ya 0 day. Them they never seen the cracking cell a lot. They know my pocket and the rest of them are infantry. Them a king of the bugging, no so them a straight tugging. When they come to the legal acting, and the other skills lacking. Them say try harder, them resolve and never swear. At the street and at the business competition second grade. The rest of those noobs who run the tools, say them not have what it takes to break the rules. Run them call it the next like a Jedi master. Breaking out your system like a full-time blaster. Check the counter, boy, you know you have to cop it. Android system, you can hack from your pockets. All OffSec, them are the very best. All OffSec for penetration tests. Who's OffSec to educate the rest? We call the expert DB and not training OffSec. Who for me so is? You must try harder to keep up the pace. Otherwise you will be a big disgrace. Tell the competition them to take a rest. OffSec or run the game. Let me suggest you GM or run the Wild West. Can't test OffSec.
Well, it's that time, folks. You don't have to go home, but you can stay here. It has been the pleasure of my week to be here with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon, folks.